Michael, we rebel! Bring the music out, bring the music out. Come on, get on your feet, give him a hand, up, come on, bring up the music. Come on, come on, come on, yo. Yeah. Got to have it. Money. All right. Okay. Thank you. Everybody's heart's racing now, right?
Yeah, man.
That's all of our theme songs. You know, they say that, you know, the sin isn't really to have money, actually. It's trying to love it too much. But I do love it. Maybe I'm sinful, but I figure that if I'm going to do anything to help, I got to have something to help with.
That's right.
And in order for us to make a life for ourselves and for our families, in today's world, we better be serious about being in business. You know, it's nice to have a good job. We were always taught that that's the way to go. But sometimes I reflect on slavery, and I reflect in a kind of a weird way, because sometimes I wonder if we're not just in the middle of the evolution of slavery. Because when I see us on welfare, when I see us in jail, when I see us in other forms of servitude where we can't make a salary to support our own families, not enough money coming in, what is that really, other than being dependent and being a child all your life? Well, Brother Ali,
yes, sir.
Your vision is to turn this world upside down, and it's not like having a big interruption to make a change.
That's right.
Let's give him a round of applause. I'm moved to discuss a few things today. You know, the concept of asset-controlled wealth is an interesting one, because for me, I can speak from a testimonial standpoint. You know, when I taken my companies, a few of my companies public, it's amazing when you start trying to figure out how to finance something. Like, for example, when I built my wireless phone company, and there was absolutely no way for me to raise $100 million to build it at that time. Now, let me back up. My daddy worked at the post office for 39 years. The very week I graduated from law school, my mama graduated from college. And then my brother finished college and then started on. Now, so I guess the best way to put it is we weren't rich, we weren't poor, we just never had any money. Anybody like that in here? And when you begin to start your life at a comfort zone of family first, where you know that you have the support of your family, then you can do some magnificent things. Now, sometimes it takes a while to get that family. Guess what? We are that family today, aren't we?
All right.
Yes, we are. And as we look into the 21st century, and we look at what the theme is, new money,
yes, sir.
It becomes a question: what is new money? New money, our old money, we used to think of as just rich white folks who had made it back at the turn of the last century, and they passed it on through wealth. The Fords, the Rockefellers, the Mellons, that sort of so-called blue blood money is what they used to call old money. The question is, well, what is new money? And how do we approach that concept in a much broader perspective than we usually do? I know that we often talk about the importance of buying tax liens and buying property. I've done that. And you can make money with it. But the one thing that I hear too often is us bragging about how much money we're making, but how much are we saving and how much are we keeping? Because too frequently, when I hear these stories of making, $500,000 or 500,000, we have another part of that story that we have to incorporate, and that is paying taxes. Too often we get this fast money, we spend it, and then one day Uncle Sam comes knocking on the door, and Uncle Sam is saying, "I want my cut."
Yes, I know that.
So you better be ready to have the understanding of the entire system, which I'm sure everybody else in here does. Now, when I started one of my companies, now let me just back up because I know a lot of you don't really know me. Maybe you heard my name, Mike Roberts or Steve Roberts. Frequently you heard it, but you don't know much about it. But you know why? It's because rich people scream, but wealthy people whisper. But we're not going to whisper today. We're going to talk about the real deal. We're going to talk about how when I finished law school, I moved 2 blocks from the projects where I lived for 10 years, was elected to the city council there, to our board of aldermen, worked with our people, gave that strong political commitment, understood the problems and the issues of our folks in the projects, which meant I had to deal with everything from the drug dealers to the folks just trying to pull themselves out of that very negative environment. So you had to understand how the gangsters work, and you had to get some respect. So, as I always say, don't let the light skin fool you. I got plenty of street cred. But I started by looking in my own neighborhood, which was run down, and buying property and building within my own community. Then one day, after my brother came out of law school, he moved and did the same thing. He ran for office. We both became aldermen at the same time. And Ebony did a big story back in those days. Most of you too young to remember those days, but there was a story that said the dynamic duo, Roberts Brothers, yielding a 1-2 punch on city government in St. Louis. And we were the ones that created all types of legislation that created the convention center and the conversion of the Union Station. And it goes on and on. All the big projects we led back in those days. And that gave us, now understand, we're in our 20s. But what we were trying to do is understand how that worked, while at the same time representing corporations and understanding the corporate language. You see, they have a language, and we didn't work for them. They hired us as consultants to advise them. And in the process, as you learn more about the corporate language, as you put yourself out there more, you become a different kind of person than you were when you were a kid growing up. But that entrepreneurial bug kept on biting. And one day some folks came in and said, "Hey, listen, there's a TV license that is available in St. Louis. Would you like to apply for it?" And they claimed that at the time they had these licenses with a special, if you were a minority, you were able to get a special consideration. Well, no others applied until we applied, and then about 6 other so-called minorities applied. And it took us about 8 years to knock them out, and we ended up winning. And then at that time, see, I'm looking at how do you look into the future? At that time, there was something called the Home Shopping Network that was just evolving. And the Home Shopping Network needed TV stations to help broadcast their signal. We became that. We built a relationship with them. They helped us raise the money. In fact, they raised 100% of the money, took a 49% interest. They became our minority partner. And we ended up with a revenue stream to support the building and the ongoing operations of our TV station. From that, we went on to the next one. And before it was over, we woke up one day and we had owned up 13 full-power TV stations, the largest owner of independent TV stations in America. So while navigating through this broadcast component, we were also involved in building back our neighborhood. You remember when Sears and Roebuck, Sears moved out of the black neighborhoods? Yeah. You remember that? As it became more black, they took off. Well, in St. Louis, anybody from St. Louis? No? Well, in St. Louis, we had one right on Martin Luther King and King's Highway. And when I say Martin Luther King, we know what kind of neighborhood that probably is, right? But this is where I grew up, and this is where I lived. I was born just 2 blocks from there. In order for Sears not to get beat up too bad, they read this article in Ebony, called me and said, would you like to buy Sears? We're moving out. That building, 200,000 square foot, big parking lot. And I'm thinking, well, sure, I'll buy it, because, you know, that's what you do. You just say yes, and then you figure out later how to do it. That's how we are as black folks. In fact, I'll tell you where how I use this term, fake it till you make it, a little later in my story. But ultimately, we worked with the Urban League and some others, and we took this building, and we had what I call creative financing. Do you know what creative financing is? It's when you lie about who you are and what you have. That's what I call creative financing. Y'all can call it anything else. And interestingly enough, it was because if I could buy a building in my neighborhood, for the first duplex I bought, I had to go to my dad to see if I could borrow that $7,500, because it was $5,000 to buy it, and I needed about $2,500 to renovate it, and I was going to do it myself. I didn't know much about it, but I knew people who knew people. So we figured out how to do this and do that. So I said, Dad, can I borrow this money? He said, well, you know, he wasn't too, you know, working in the post office, you know, you don't have a lot of, you have money, you have a nice middle-class life, but you don't have extra money. So what did he do? He took me to the Postal Credit Union. Now, these are his boys, because he had been there for, you know, 20, 30 years. And I made an application for $7,500. People always ask, how do you get started? Here's an example. So they brought me in, they grilled me, and they said, well, we're going to loan you this $7,500. I said, great. They said, but we wanted you to know the collateral will be your parents' furniture. Man, did that put pressure on me. Can you imagine me not paying that back, and all of a sudden they come and take my parents' furniture out? Long story short, we kept buying and flipping, and next thing you know, it was paid off, and then the growth just kept going. And in my book, Action Has No Season, I write about a bunch of my stories, my anecdote, and a lot of anecdotal support, but also the philosophy, because you also want to get into what we define here as the mindset. And my mindset was created not only from the street cred side, but it also came about because I'm a Shakespearean scholar, and as a result, I studied mythological conventions in literature before the 17th century. So I would read Byron and Keats and Shakespeare, and I looked at, you know, how they used words and how the characters played in their little world. Then I got into existentialism, and that's when I read Sartre and Soren Kierkegaard and Martin Buber. And I realized that what they're all saying is pretty simple. And that is, when you wake up every day, you're given 86,400 seconds. Write that down. 86,400 seconds. And the moment you think of that moment, it's already gone. So therefore, you have to live every moment to its fullest extent, because that's all you have. People talk about the now. This is what they mean when they say the now. This is it. So that's an existential concept, because you are to live your moment. And so we have to apply our business minds the same way we should apply our life, and that is think business and think operations and think, well, how do we improve ourselves and where are we going to go next, and try to use and fill up your moments with a concept of moving forward in business and life. How many of you saw Freddie Haynes yesterday? Any? At the close of George Frazier's most fabulous show? And man, awesome. He's here. Let's just give him a round of applause. George is just a selfless guy. He doesn't think about himself. He's here with us today. He's just finished having, you know, probably 1,200 to 1,500 people. I'm counting the interlopers, not the ones, the 1,000 that paid, but the other 500 who just sat around and showed up. But I mean, he creates this environment for us, and we're a part of that environment, the extension of it today, that gives us all a chance to meet and greet, and as a family come together, because this looks like a big old family reunion, doesn't it? Yeah. When it's all said and done. But we're here to advise at a different level. We're here to talk at a different level. And so, George, we want to really thank you for being who you are. He's an amazing, amazing guy. He's such an amazing guy. So as we go through this discussion and this story, there are many, many components to what I did to build a company that had an asset value of $1 billion. And I use that very carefully because I'm from Missouri. That's the show me state, you see? And Muhammad Ali had his 50th birthday party at my house, one of them. And he just made such a great statement. It kind of builds me up when he says, it ain't bragging if you can back it up. So we as black folks need to stand up and say it, because so often we think that if you talk about what you're doing, somebody's going to come and take it away from you. I don't think that's going to happen. And honestly, I've got a building I just built that looks like this. Windows looking better than that up in Detroit. Because what happened was one day in Detroit, I got a call and they said, you know, this Omni Hotel is moving out. And we need to sell it. They boarded it up. There were several other companies bidding for it. And, but all of them were looking at Detroit wrong. They think, well, Detroit is Detroit. In fact, I told the story the other night how I even spoke to the economic development guy for the governor of the state, who I went to high school with, and he told me, man, don't come to Detroit. Now, wait a minute, he's in charge of building up the economy, you see? I said, well, I have a vision that's a little different than yours, and I believe that if I'm in the city that has more African Americans than any other city in the United States, that if I build it, and I build it right, and I make it really professional, then our folks will come and support it. And I got to tell you, I've been at 100% occupancy almost all summer long. Wow. Every weekend we've got family reunions or weddings. And you know, it's not an easy business because, you know, you always have the same personnel matters and issues and the physical construction and all kind of things like that that's going on. But, you know, it's important for us to manage anything we have and don't take it for granted. And just because it's looking great and beautiful today doesn't mean that it's going to be that way tomorrow. Yes. And the other thing is, you know, too often we have great businesses and people think, oh, it's going to be a great business forever. Well, it may not be, but a business is a business and it's about making money. So if the right offer comes along, what are you supposed to do? It's better be a real right offer, of course, but I mean a big one. But you know, you have to understand that the more money you can make on a deal, the more deals you can create. I've employed over my years about 11,000 people.
Wow, good betting.
Over the years. Now it's pretty cool to be able to write that many, you know, checks over those years to that many people week after week. Now I probably wonder why sometimes I can't pay my bills. I don't know. But you know, in the real world, you take care of your employees first, and yourself second. So in my book, Action Has No Season, I coined the word the actioneer. It's one who takes their ideas, their dreams, and their aspirations. There's a copy of it. Hopefully you'll go to Amazon.com and purchase it. I think we ran out, George, at your conference as always. George's people, man, our folks just eat it, take it, which is great. But I wrote the book after I became successful, after I had built and owned over 15 hotels, 13 full-power TV stations, shopping centers. I became the first and only black to have ever been on the International Council of Shopping Centers. That's all the shopping centers in the world. Wow. And it's primarily, well, true story. Once they elected me to the board, a local banker said, well, Mike, you know, you're probably going to be the first African-American to go on the board. I said, yes. He said, and you're probably going to be the first Gentile also, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Because it's a very strong Jewish control over our shopping centers. But to be able to sit with the heads of all the shopping centers and the occupants, the tenants inside of those shopping centers, There's about 55 of them worldwide, and I was one. And it was great to be able to sit at the table, because too often they talk about, quote, urban development. They use that term because they've always been in suburbs. You know what I'm saying? They were growing out, and that was falling apart. Why? Because gentrification. White folks are moving back into the city. So they had to figure out what to do. They called it urban. I had to stand up and say, well, let's call it urban, sure, but maybe there's another word. Let's call it inner city development. They didn't quite get it, but there were certain companies that understood it. Rainbow, Subway, various Payless Shoe, Family Dollar. Sorry? Yes. You know, the dollar stores. And guess what? When the recession hit, who do you think was making all the money? They were. And now look at all the big boxes that are closing up.
That's right.
Because they had the stores where the money was. Our $1.2, $1.3 trillion was supporting those businesses. And they grew, and I built probably 4 dollar stores in some of my developments. So it's been pretty cool to see that happen. So I feel like I'm kind of all over the place, but that's kind of like my life. You know, we've done a lot of things, including building probably the only African American to ever build a true phone company, a wireless phone company. And you remember when we had analog phones? Yeah. You know, the snap, crackle, drop. You remember those phones? And the coolest person in the theater had a big suitcase with a phone in it. Innovation, moving along, and it continues to move along even today. I looked at that, got into the auctions, ended up with the licenses to build a true digital phone company. I did it, but I needed to talk to Sprint to make sure that I could have a brand behind it. When I flew my private jets over to see him with my 10 guys, I don't have those jets anymore, but I did at one time. We flew in, 10 of us, to meet with Sprint. I remember it like it was yesterday. Sprint officials had 2, we had 10. We explained how we could build this company and build it quickly. They told us, well, the only problem is we don't do business with entrepreneurs. We do business with landline rural phone companies, so they can have an overlay on top of the landline. I said, yes, but there's probably 40 or 50 of them in Missouri. And then when they told me that they wouldn't do it, I said, fine. But I said, one important thing for you to remember, and that is in this business, it's first to market. And I can assure you that I will build my half of the Missouri where I had licenses long before you figure it out. But thank you very much. I was very pleased that we had this meeting. 2 months later, I get a call. They said, can we have dinner? And when we came back, we said, the board has changed its mind. We would like for you, Roberts Wireless, to be our affiliate in Missouri. I said, great. He said, here's a map, draw out what you want. So I drew all of Missouri, some of Kansas, some of Arkansas, and the lower side of Illinois, and true story. Then later on, we had to figure out how to pay for this thing, right? So it had gone from almost 100 million as an independent to about 54 million. The prices were dropping. There was basically 2 companies that had the primary selling of the equipment, Lucent and Nortel. And Nortel had already built in St. Louis and Kansas City for Sprint. You see, Sprint had already spent $10 billion building cities, the large cities, but they need others in the rural areas all over the United States. That's how we came about. Are y'all okay with this story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to bore you. You know, it's nice and quiet, but usually that's a good sign.
We're listening.
Because it's history and it's the truth, you know. Yeah. So I didn't know how to quite raise all the money. When I would go up to New York and talk to those, you know, real rich people who controlled money, like Dr. Cash over there, but they were different complexion. They would laugh at me and fall out their chair. I'd have to pick them up and put them back in their seat when I said I needed $100 million. But when the prices dropped from a competitive perspective, I went to those 2 companies. And why did I go there? Well, I was at the Broadmoor. I had to figure out how to play golf because all those white folks play golf, so I had to figure that out. But it ended up, it was funded by Lucent. Now why would people like Lucent and Nortel? Because when they build the base stations, I mean, when we build them, we buy their equipment, their towers and all that. So I asked one of the other guys, white guys, that were like me, I said, how are you guys getting this financed? Because I can't figure this out. And here's the magic word. They said, well, we all use vendor financing. Vendor financing. Interesting. Never heard of that. They didn't teach me that in school. I didn't have any rich cousin or uncle who said, oh yeah, well, we do that all the time. Vendor financing. So now the question is, who am I going to get to do that? So I went to Nortel. Nortel had built Nortel equipment in St. Louis and Kansas City and in Jefferson City, which is in the middle of our state. And Nortel figured they had it on lock, all of Missouri. They didn't know that I also had control over Jefferson City. And so I went to them and they said, yeah, we'll do vendor financing, but it'd be dollar for dollar. We had sold most of our stations by now, raising money. So that meant we'd have to come up with half, and they'd come up with half. We didn't have that. So I went to Lucent, who sponsored that golf tournament. And I happened to be in the same condo building as the guy who was in charge of it. So I said to him, I said, listen, how would you like to have the backyard of Sprint, which is Missouri, Sprint's in Kansas City, and have your brand all over that state? Yeah, but you know, Nortel's, and so I said, yeah, but I control what I'm talking about. And he said, let me go back, listen to this. He went back to Lucent, and he came back and said, we will give you 100% of what you need, $54 million. Wow. And we will give you enough money to take the Nortel equipment out of that Jefferson City the middle of the state, and put in our equipment. And I said, well, thank you very much. So half of, I know, right? So half of it was used to build the infrastructure, and the other half is used to finance our ongoing operations. Then one day, we're now owning and operating, but still building in areas, an actual phone company. I mean a legitimate phone company. Not a reseller of other people's backbone, but we owned it. We owned the towers, we owned everything. You remember WorldCom? Yeah. So WorldCom one day announced that they were going to buy Sprint. All of us affiliates, and 14 of us said, wow, we better do something smart. Let's consolidate. At least a couple of us should consolidate and go public. And when we consolidated and we went public, two others in our company did that. Why? So we could be the biggest one. So if Sprint ends up being sold to WorldCom, they'd have to negotiate with us because they would try to roll us up. Well, we did that. And when we went public, my debt was paid off. They gave us about $300 million. We decided to take that in the stock of our own company. And one of the things that's clever about a transaction is always know what the other person wants to buy. You see, when we were selling some TV stations, we realized that it wasn't that they wanted our towers and our buildings. What they wanted was the frequency. So we would sell the frequency and keep the towers and lease them back, vertical real estate. And then following that same lesson, we did exactly the same thing with our cellular company. We ended up keeping 200 towers. Ultimately, in this world, it's really great of business. Sprint stayed on board. WorldCom's people went to jail, right? Remember that? And ultimately, Sprint did roll us up. And when they did, it was great, but we kept the towers. So we made money on that sale. And then about 3 years later, American Tower, which is one of our bigger tower companies, we could let them compete with a couple of the other tower companies. And the tower companies came to us and said, look, we can't grow based on our stockholders' interest by building one cell at a time. We need to buy packages. We were the second largest tower company at that time. Just by accident, but being smart, by figuring out what is it that they need to buy. And they came along and said, well, we'll be happy to buy your company for $97 million. Bye-bye cells. We'll see you later. And by the way, whenever I see a cell and I drive by them, I hear this wonderful sound. Cha-ching, cha-ching. Because it's a vertical real estate, and I just know money's being made there. I'm coming close to wrapping up. You know, these are just anecdotal stories, but I think it's important for us to go back quickly to the philosophy of where the future is going to take us. I think we have to start looking at businesses that are involved with artificial intelligence, robotics. You know, we don't think of that sometimes as black folks. In fact, most folks don't. But we have to look at where will artificial intelligence take us. It'll be, you know, controlling many of our households. It'll be controlling a lot of our lives. It'll be our companions. What company owns more taxi services and don't own one car in the United States? What's the name of it? Right. And what company has more hotel rooms but doesn't own one hotel than any other company in the world today? Airbnb. How clever innovation can be. And that's what we have to recognize. You've all heard a little discussions about cryptocurrency. I'm going to close by discussing that. We've seen, I know that you've all been on phone calls with Ali to talk about the Bitcoin and some of the other ones. I know that it's an important future. I feel that way. Currency is defined in a lot of ways. When we were early people, if I had a barrel of corn and you had some chickens, that was our currency. We would exchange, right? And then eventually the currency became some rocks. Y'all call it gold, but what is gold really? It's just some rocks. Diamonds are some rocks, silver some rocks. But we began to psychologically put a value on it. It was a mindset that took place. Then they made coins out of it. Then they turned the coins to paper, fiat paper, and credit cards, and other ways to move money, but it's all being moved with numbers, ones and zeros. Well, the future of cryptocurrency basically is the same thing, only it's the advance and it's global, and it'll be the type of currency that won't fluctuate based on one or the other. In other words, the dollar may go up or down, or the euro may go up and down, but a coin will go up and down. And remember, it's not a coin in the true sense of the word coin. It's really it's a numbers in your wallet, and your wallet is your phone. How many know a little bit about Bitcoins? You've heard of it, right? Okay, great. And how many of you understand the blockchain and how that works? A few of you. Okay, well, the blockchain is that which controls all the transactions or monitors the transactions of your cryptocurrency. I'm not an expert, but I'll say it in simple terms. Think of a ledger, and every transaction that takes place is written in the ledger, whether it comes in or goes out. Will you follow me so far? Yeah. Well, a blockchain is that same data being stacked, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miners and other computer folks around the world are monitoring each and every one of those transactions. So if you buy a building or you build one, it'll have the name of the owner, it'll have the name of the architect and the contractor, and so on and so forth. If somebody tried to hack it and pull out any one of those components of the ledger, all the others that already have a copy will immediately fill it back up in the original sense. So now you have this thing called the blockchain, which is going to control all the data of almost every transaction in the world. Now, this is going to stretch your mind. You remember when we had carbon paper to make copies? And then we got used to a copy machine. And then we got used to faxes, a fax machine. Now think about what you were thinking when you went from a fax machine to something that they call the internet. You were like, what do I need to do? I have to understand codes? What is that? But it migrated into our culture, and now we wouldn't know what to do without it. My projection or vision is that at some point, blockchain will replace the internet as we know it. And now their eyes get glossy, and I understand why. But my encouragement to you would be, go to YouTube, let some TED Talk type folks talk to you about blockchain, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and recognize that when I learned more first really about the Bitcoin, it was at $800, and that was in January. By March, it had exceeded the value of an ounce of gold, over $1,200. And if you were to go to Siri or something and ask, well, what's today's value, it's going to show somewhere between $2,500 and $2,700 since March. And what is it? It is a question of scarcity, desire on a global basis of people who believe in it and will use it. Now, in the case of the Bitcoin and all the other coins that eventually will surface, you'll be able to use that coin for Amazon.com. I've even seen it where you can use your phone, which is your wallet, and be able to pull out enough money out of that system to buy a Subway sandwich. So we're going to see all of these different ways to use currency. And we're going to have to get our minds around what is currency in the future. So as we talked about earlier, new money. I think that's really what was in the wisdom of Ali when he was trying to say, well, what is really new money? I think new money is creating it. And they used to say money don't grow on trees. Well, I'm not sure about that anymore. It may grow on a crypto tree in order for it to be what it is. So I decided that what I was going to do, and I've been meeting with my guys on this, is to create the Action Coin, which is a coin that will be targeting black folks. So we have the entry level, and then we'll let the scarcity drive it up. But we'll be in first on that. As we pull it together, I don't want anybody to invest in it who can't afford to lose that which you invest. I will compare it to a share of General Motors stock. If I had one share of General Motors stock, what do I have? They don't issue certificates anymore. Your broker has a number. That's all it is. And those numbers exchange numbers, and then people pick up money on all of your exchanges, including the banks. All the banks, when you have any kind of transaction, you go down the line and there's people picking up a little piece here and there. Well, we're going to own the company that'll pick up the transactions, but they'll be a lot smaller, and they'll be more direct, and they'll be faster, and we'll be able to control our own destiny and have more money in our pockets, or in our wallets, as we'll call it. That's how we're taking the future. And that's what I'm planning to establish. The Action Coin comes from my book, The Actionaire. And if you go to www.actionaires.com, you'll be able to sign up. Now, we're going to have an initial coin offering, which is similar to an IPO, but it's not, it doesn't have the same impact in that it doesn't have the same restrictions. It's unrestricted, in fact. So again, what we would have is a fiduciary responsibility. Once you buy in, you'll get what's called tokens, and once we finish building out the protocol and all the backbone for the operation and the flow, those tokens will become coin. Now remember, it's not a real coin like we think the word coin, but it's ones and zeros inside of your phone, and then someday you'll have a little code, so when you walk up to a hotel like this, you just put your phone next to their receiver, it'll extract the amount of money that's necessary for your room, and you'll be off and running. So I'm going to conclude, because this is a long day for everybody, and I do have to dash to St. Louis. When Freddie Haynes was speaking yesterday, he talked about a box, and how too often we are in a box, and we continue to frame our box, and we continue to put ourselves in a position where our minds are limited. I spoke to Pastor Haynes afterwards, and I said, I have a little bit of a twist on what you had to say. For example, how many of you in this room think outside the box? Raise your hand. Okay, put your hands down. And I told Freddie what I would do is ask people that question, then my next words to you would be, I'm going to spank you. I'm going to spank you because what you're telling me is that you think outside the box, which presumes that you are in a box. I know it's Sunday, and you say, brother, don't hurt me like this. But I have to give our minds a different direction. You see, there's nothing but the horizon. There's no such thing as a box. And the pastor said, you know what, I'm going to quote you, and I'm going to use that. Because even as he finished his statements, he still had a box. in the minds of people, whether it's a larger box or smaller box. There's no such thing as a box.
Yes.
Too often the reason we don't succeed is because we have a fear of failure. I mean, how many times have you heard people have this one idea or this other idea, and they will say, oh, I had that idea 3 years ago. They failed to take action, but they had a fear of failure. I'm gonna break it down as I draw to close. Fear is just a mental construct. It doesn't exist. You were born without it. You were born perfect. God gave you perfection. You allowed fear to enter into your mind. And it's like the obnoxious cousin who comes and visits for a day and stays for about a month. Sometimes you just can't get rid of that. But it's a state of mind. Sister from Chicago, you know. What's your name?
Sherry.
Sherry, I'm looking at you.
Oh, Sherry. Oh, Sherry.
Sherry.
Yes. Oh, Linda?
Yeah, her.
Linda.
You remember when you stood up here and you said, when you stood up here and you said that there was a time in your life when things just weren't right? And now it's right? That was a state of mind change. You allowed yourself to change your thinking. Second word, fear. Remember how many seconds in the day are there? 86,400 seconds. Now, whether you had a divorce or a business that didn't work out or anything that exists, I submit to you there's no such thing as failure. I hear that word over and over and I cringe when I hear it because it's a mindset. It's never a failure. Anytime you do something, you learn from it. You gain knowledge from everything you do. And you have to use that knowledge. And you have to continue to repeat the good side of things in your life and let those negative things go. But it's not failure. It's just simply an outcome that you would have preferred to have been different. That's all it is, nothing more, nothing less. So now today, you're actionaires, you're no-box thinkers, you've eliminated the fear of failure, you realize that there's no such thing as that, and if you get that out of your head and you move along with your life, things are going to be so much different. You're going to achieve that billionaire status, but it's in your mind to get there, and then if you allow that to continue to pursue in your brain, you'll make it. Because the first step was just to get here.
Yes.
The first step is to get to know people like Dr. Ali.
Yes.
Very important. To get to know people like Dr. Frazier and Dr. Cash and so many. Everybody in this room has something to exchange. So let's just make sure that that network, that true networking, that, as we say, prosperity networking, takes place today. I wish you all well. Happy Sunday. Now let's get busy and make a lot of money. God bless. Thank
you. Great job. Woo-hoo. This is one and only. Special mention. All right. As I said, we're going to be out at 4 today. You guys can go and get some sunshine. We're going to come.